in terms of like widespread adoption, I also see the West having a big impact on adoption because price is the ultimate signal. So still most of the big money is going to come from here. I don't want to say it's only going to be because of like South America and Africa, people using it. Altcoins, including Ethereum, I've always seen them in two ways that are very contradictory to each other. I see them as like a Trojan horse for Bitcoin, but I also see them as an attack on Bitcoin because...
All right. I am back with another edition of the State of Bitcoin podcast where I got the man, Neil Jacobs, here with me. And he is just all over the Bitcoin space. But you had a really interesting tweet that I want to bring up here in 2021 about Bitcoin, about internet adoption. So you kind of had this clip about how the media was talking about internet adoption in 1994. How everybody was kind of off about, what they were saying. They were saying the internet is all crazy, everything like that. And people are always saying that we're early about in the Bitcoin space. So I'm curious, where do you think we are in the Bitcoin adoption cycle? Are we early? Are we late? Are we in the middle? Where do you think we're at?
So you're pulling a tweet of mine from 2021. You're really doing your research.
Hey man, I got to do the work, right?
Yeah. I would say we're still in the early adopter phase. I don't really count people who just buy Bitcoin on like a Coinbase and never take it off as someone who's really adopted Bitcoin. It's a good first step. Not using Coinbase, but buying Bitcoin. But until you understand the value proposition of holding money that's censorship resistant and unconfiscatable, I don't know if I'd consider that adoption by an individual user. So I'd say we're still in the very early phases. And I think the video you're referring to was like from like NBC or like Good Morning America, one of those where they're like, oh, what's the @ symbol in like an email or something like that, right? We're definitely at that point still, because if you have mainstream news, when they talk about Bitcoin, they still sound that elementary on it. Now, if you get in some of the fintech space like CNBC, Fox Business, they're starting to get better over the years. They definitely are moving in the right direction, but we're still very early.
So then what do you think is that, like, I guess the next step in adoption, right? I mean, you kind of described like them being curious about the @ symbol. Like, what do you kind of compare that to now? Because, we're getting a lot, it's like almost like holding it on a Coinbase or something like that. But, do we still have a lot of people holding Bitcoin on, Lightning wallets on their phone, kind of like transacting back and forth maybe a little bit? Maybe is that the next step? Like, where do you think, I guess, is the next big step forward for Bitcoin adoption?
It's such a loaded and complicated question. Things like this help Bitcoin adoption, right? Just talking about it with people, doing podcasts, people who speak, write books. I would say once you have people really using it on a day-to-day basis and some sort of like smaller economy, even in places where there's really bad inflation, close to hyperinflation, you still have people retreating to dollars mostly, or stable coins, right? And we're going to see it happen in those places first. Look to South America, look to Africa. Until you see real like widespread adoption and use there, it's not... The Western world is going to be the last to catch up to it. Even though most of the big money goes into Bitcoin here, in terms of it being used as, a day-to-day medium of exchange, it's going to happen here last, probably. In the U.S., when I say here.
Yeah, no, I agree with you there too, right? I mean, what's really the incentive, when it comes to the United States? I mean, we have the global reserve currency now as it stands, right? I mean, the dollar is strong compared to the relatively, like, all the other fiat currencies and everything like that. But I mean, I do see your point, right? I mean, we need Latin America, we need Africa, we need those places to adopt in order for Bitcoin adoption to kind of occur globally. And I think that's where the kind of the grassroots adoption is going to take place. But it does seem like there's a lot of FUD and kind of other things around, I guess, just Bitcoin and Bitcoin adoption when it comes to nation states, right? Obviously, we have El Salvador, who's been very lucky with Bukele, who seems to be very like orange pilled. But what worries me is potentially like some of these other countries falling into like maybe the Ethereum trap or some of these other like, shitcoin, altcoin kind of paths. So, what do you, I guess, see? Do you think that that's kind of I guess a good, not a good worry, but like, do you see kind of where I'm coming from in that or in that aspect of things? Or do you think like, I guess the altcoin market, because there's been so much FUD with like things like Celsius, FTX, BlockFi, that those have kind of, not fallen by the wayside, but kind of got away a little bit.
Okay, I'll answer that. I want to just circle back to something I said before really quick. So in terms of like widespread adoption, I also see the West having a big impact on adoption because price is the ultimate signal. So still most of the big money is going to come from here. So I think those two things will kind of run parallel. I don't want to say it's only going to be because of like South America and Africa, people using it. In terms of widespread use, and if we're saying use in terms of medium exchange use, then I think there. But in terms of helping adoption forward, you need number to go up. I think people who say you don't are in denial because if Bitcoin was at zero, no one would be here. So you need it to go in the opposite direction. As far as things like the second, your point about like Ethereum, altcoins, including Ethereum, I see them, I've always seen them in two ways that are very contradictory to each other. I see them as like a Trojan horse for Bitcoin, right? It lets Bitcoin do its thing. It kind of distracts government officials and regulators from understanding Bitcoin as like this separate beast. But I also see them as an attack on Bitcoin because they're really just an extension of the fiat system, right? Instead of a government controlling currency, it's just private actors, which will eventually be co-opted by a government anyways if it gets too big. That's the one thing about Bitcoin, at least in theory, we don't think it could be co-opted, where all these other ones clearly have leaders and can be.
What do you mean by in theory? I feel like there's something behind that.
No, I just was qualifying it. I mean, it's not even theory. There's no leader, right? There's no face for Bitcoin. Maybe I shouldn't even have said that. Yeah, I guess I retract the in theory.
No, that's fair. I mean, I'm just kind of curious too, because like, you do a lot of great stuff with, your FOMO 21 shop, which I feel like, a lot of people who have like Bitcoin related merch and like, Bitcoin, related products and those things like that. Like, obviously there's no CEO behind Bitcoin, but there is, people like yourself and other things that are kind of like, I guess, marketing to people, marketing Bitcoin in a sense. So I guess like, where do you kind of see, I guess, not only like how you and FOMO like 21 shop like fits in, but like just kind of like that marketing aspect. Like, do you think, well, I guess like in a bird's eye view, how would you describe the marketing message right now to like the average Joe of Bitcoin to people?
Well, so FOMO 21 started, someone, Sky Ryan, he goes by Hodl for Good on Twitter, reached out to me about early 2022, saying that he'd been in the merch industry, reached out to me, pitched this idea that a Bitcoin merch and apparel shop, and I was totally on board. I think he messaged me, and then later on that day we had a call for like a half hour, an hour, and I was in. And since then, the business has done well, slow and steady. It's tough during a bear market, but it's gone well. And I really look, like, bottom line is, I have to allocate a lot of time to it, so I want to make money off it. I'm not like trying to hide there. I'm trying to like run a successful business, but at the same time, I do see it as helping spread the word about Bitcoin. I knew, I wasn't going to be building the next hardware wallet. I wasn't going to be, um, onboarding people to Bitcoin through setting up my own Bitcoin brokerage firm. Like those weren't things that I was going to do. Always was talking to people about Bitcoin and educating them about Bitcoin and help spreading awareness in the ways I could. So this is a way for me to have a business, but also spread Bitcoin to the masses in my own way. People wear our stuff. So like I'm wearing one right now, enjoy Bitcoin. And it starts conversation in public. Like someone would definitely do a double take at the shirt and say like, oh, I thought I saw one thing, right? And then they saw, oh, it says Bitcoin, right? So there's all our shirts, like definitely, and hats and everything else we have. It starts conversations. I like to look at it too as I get to bring memes to real life. So I'll see a meme, I'll slap it on a T-shirt in our own way, and yeah, it's just I have a good time with it. It's fun. Everyone likes merch. Everyone wears clothes, right? So, we definitely have a certain like target demographic. But yeah, it's a fun thing, and if I'm helping, even if it's in a 0.0001% way, I'm happy doing it.
Yeah, but I mean, my point was not necessarily like I guess like trying to build like a negative light or anything like that, because I agree with you, right? I mean, everybody wants the value kind of seems to work, but at the end of the day, like, businesses have to make money. That's like where, Bitcoin startup kind of has to, go through, especially like right now, right? It needs to be somewhat profitable and all that kind of stuff. But I think, part of what you're doing is very beneficial to Bitcoin, right? Because if you're wearing like I don't know, it's like, it looks like Coca-Cola kind of seems shirt, and then people have to do a double take and look and see it says Bitcoin. And, they always say it takes like 5 to 7 touch points for somebody to really start to look into something. But even if it's something where somebody's walking down the street, you're in a restaurant and you're in a bar or something like that, I mean, it's one touch point, right? And I think like at the end of the day, either can strike a conversation or somebody can notice it and you don't even really know, like, hey, this person saw Neil's shirt, walking down the street of, name a city. And so I think like these kind of movements are extremely beneficial to sort of orange pill people. But, when you are like wearing some of your merch and bringing some of these memes to life, I guess, do you get any like random Joes off the street kind of asking you about it? Has it struck up a bunch of conversations or anything like that?
Yeah, I get conversations start up a lot. But I also hear stories from people in the Bitcoin community all the time that tell me, oh, I was wearing your shirt and this person, just started talking to me, asking me about it. That's the most rewarding thing. I already like get to talk to people on a daily basis, and I don't get out much. So a lot of people aren't seeing my shirts except when I go to the grocery store or to Bitcoin meetup. So I'm not really necessarily orange pilling people there. Although there is new people that come to them all the time. But yeah, I hear stories from people, and it makes me feel good. It makes me feel like, oh, it's not just about, selling merch. It's about spreading awareness about Bitcoin.
Yeah, now I'm gonna pull out some more research for you here.
Oh no!
See another tweet where you had
it's funny. Some people it's so random, like or retweet a really old tweet of mine occasionally, and I'm like, oh, did I really say that? Fucking now I got to justify it, so I can't wait to hear what you're about to say.
It's really, I mean, I'm not pulling anything bad. It's just I feel like it's kind of like something to I agree. Like I think the pulling of like old tweets, it's always a tough look.
No, it's good. Go for it. Hit me with it. Everything I say, everything I tweet out, I'm not just doing it for like attention. I actually like believe it when I tweet it. So let her rip.
Yeah, but this one is you basically took a clip from Samson Mao where he was on national television, kind of going on national TV, making the distinction between Bitcoin and crypto.
I remember that.
going on that. You do remember that or?
Yes, and I put like little like blurbs at the bottom every single time, and I like cut the video up a little bit.
Yeah, you cut it up a lot. We went from 18 minutes to like a minute and a half. So
You know, you don't have a lot of attention span with people, right? Like, honestly, if you can't capture their attention in 3 to 5 seconds, it's gone. There's metrics in terms of like, not to get too off topic, but in terms of our merch site, when people go to like commercial websites, if it takes like more than like 2 seconds to load, you lose a large percentage of people. So it's all material to like catch attention. But go ahead. Yeah, I remember that one.
I believe that. Yeah. But I mean, I kind of like, I want to dive into that a little bit because I think like, that's kind of maybe a question we might get, like Bitcoin or, people like the average, I mean, I get it with my friends and like, they know me, like, and one of my friends here in Tampa where I'm at know me as like a Bitcoin guy. And so they always bring it up and say crypto, and I like kind of cringe a little bit and try to say, well, there's a little bit of a difference, but then they don't want to hear anything about it. So I'm curious, like, how do you think, like, when people come up to you maybe and ask you about, Bitcoin and kind of like lump them together, what do you think, I guess, is a good way to kind of, I guess, flip the conversation a little bit and make the distinction between Bitcoin and crypto?
Um, I'm very specific when people do that. I say, I'll tell people, oh, yeah, I do some stuff in the Bitcoin space. They're like, oh, yeah, crypto. I'm like, no, Bitcoin. And they'll be like, oh, yeah, I'm like, no. I say, I'm not trying to be like an asshole here, but there's Bitcoin, and then there's all this other crypto nonsense. And it's mostly, if not all bullshit. There's nothing I find interesting about it. I focus on Bitcoin. Like, I really redirect it. I don't try to make the person wrong because they just know what they know from hearing it. The news clip. I'm just like, no, there's Bitcoin, and it has a purpose that can change the world. And that's what I'm dedicating my time to. And then, if you really want to go down the rabbit hole with them, the first thing I try to identify where's that person coming from? What's their job? Where are they from? Are they a man? Are they a woman? Are they older, younger, right? So you try to relate something to them. And I kind of go into just like, what is money? I don't really talk about Bitcoin at first. You got to start with what is money. If you just jump into what Bitcoin is specifically, people are going to be lost because they don't even understand what money is.
Yeah, that's fair. And I think that's, a good point. It's always about the money, right? I mean, but I feel like it's kind of getting in an easier conversation with like inflation and kind of where things are going now, right? So, you brought up that you talk to people or sometimes you get approached in the grocery store. And I feel like that's kind of like where everybody's pointing to inflation, right? I mean, we had eggflation, which was very popular on Twitter for a little bit. We have like kind of people going down to their food. You're seeing meat prices being exponentially higher. So have you found that, I guess throughout your time in Bitcoin, I know you go to a lot of these conferences, you travel around a little bit. So when people come up to you and maybe it's in the grocery store, do you feel like that conversation has gotten a little bit easier because, I guess inflation is just right in front of us?
It's definitely an easier starting point, but you got to be careful, like saying that Bitcoin is going to protect you from inflation just due to the nascent aspect of Bitcoin, and there's a lot of volatility. Because if you say, oh, it's an inflation hedge, people say, well, it's gone down 70% over the past, I don't know, what is it now, almost 2 years, right? So you got to be careful. You got to talk about monetary inflation, right? That the supply is what's, fixed with Bitcoin. And with our other money or fiat money, it's not. So you have to really make the distinction. I try to stay away from the inflation aspect. And if I'm going to talk about it, I'm going to be very granular and talk about fixed units. Because there's other things that drive price, right? Just pure supply and demand. There's a shortage of something, the price goes up. There's an abundance of something, the price may go down. Or if there's no demand, the price will go down. So there's other factors that affect price on a daily basis. So you got to be careful about that. I don't really know if I answered the question or not. I'm forgetting the question. But now, is it easier to talk to people in a grocery store now? I don't know. I think it's become more real for Americans that there's something wrong. And that is really important, that people identify there is a problem. They just don't know what's causing it, right? And where it comes from.
Yeah.
So yes, I don't know.
What your question? Yes, yeah. I mean that's kind of like where I would word it. In a sense, right? Is like people are more aware of like, hey, like I can't, go out as much. Okay, I have to actually. Before I didn't really have to worry about money. I could just, go eat out with my friends. But now I have to be more cautious. Like, I can only go out to eat with my friends twice a week. Well, when there's happy hour or some deals or something like that, opposed to, just going for that beer after work every single day or something with the coworkers. So I definitely think that there are people, people are more aware in a sense with that. So, but yeah, I mean, I definitely think like we're kind of in an interesting spot, and I kind of want to revert back to something that you said earlier about adoption when you're talking about the internet, because you kind of said we're in the state where people kind of buy Bitcoin and hold it on Coinbase. Well, I mean, there's obviously been a lot of I guess turmoil in some of the exchanges. Obviously like Coinbase, BlockFi, FTX, but even some like the Bitcoin only ones with like, when trust kind of following and that connected to it, to a lot of the various Bitcoin exchanges. So, I guess in a sense, like where do you think like exchanges and like, that aspects of things, it plays into Bitcoin adoption and kind of like moving forward, whether it's an education aspect of things or, just kind of, just making it easier for people to hold Bitcoin.
It definitely hurts adoption when you have chaos, and especially when crypto is conflated with Bitcoin and crypto exchanges are conflated with Bitcoin, and then you have all these custody providers that have had their own issues. That's why I really think from the first discussion you had with someone about Bitcoin, you really have to jump to the self-custody discussion. You don't have to tell them they need to do that right away, but you have to let them know like that is an option and that's the goal you need to get to eventually. Because what else is the point, right? That's the value proposition. If you're just here for to capture like price appreciation, you could buy a ETF, like in one of the international Bitcoin ETFs, right? So yeah, it's just imperative you jump to self-custody, at least in your discussion. I'm not saying like you teach someone about Bitcoin, the next day they need to figure out how to use like a cold card or a Trezor, right? Like I'm not saying that. I've seen a lot of talk recently. I don't know if we're going to go into this or not, with like custodians. Bitcoiners are like, oh, you use this custodian, oh, you use that custodian. It's kind of funny to see Bitcoiners obsessed with like what custodians people are using. Bitcoiners used to like only champion and encourage self-custody. So it's funny that they're getting hung up on who the custodian is. I'm not saying there isn't, I'm not saying that the discussion isn't worth happening. I think it's just being a little overblown.
Yeah, I mean, what do you mean by that? Because, I agree with you, right? I mean, Bitcoiners were all about self-custody, and then, now, obviously, Swan and Strike were using Prime Trust, just to name a few. I mean, I think Fold was as well, like all the kind of big name companies, and then they're having to either figure it out now, and they're kind of in a weird transition period, or they're moving to other ones, which, opens up some liability and some aspects of things. So, yeah, I mean, I guess why do you think that there's so much focus on some of these companies now when it comes to the custodians? Do you think it's just because it's a bear market, there's not really much else going on, or do you think like, I guess in a sense, I guess people, when they're orange pilling people, they bring them to these custodians initially, so they feel some sort of responsibility when these custodians have some sort of issues, or the custodians kind of fail or make a poor decision, I guess, when it comes to like, I guess, helping Bitcoiners move forward and move to like self-custody.
So yeah, you mentioned a few companies. First off, Swan, I've done contract work for them over the years and do have a close relationship with them. So I just want to like get that out there. I've also in the past been like a heavy promoter of like Fold and wanting, people to use Fold. So just to get that out there before any of my biases show. I think part of it is a bear market. People are looking for things. I don't think it's all like bad intentions. Bitcoiners by nature are very curious, skeptical, and it's important to drill down on these things. Uh, so I think there's some people with good intentions trying to drill into this. I think there's others who are, holding bags, meaning, they might be invested in competitors to this company or that company. You don't know who's sitting behind what Anon account out there. And not that it's only Anons. Also, there's certain, people that are called influencers that have investments in certain companies, and you never know about the relationships. So you got to be careful, really take everything, at face value and do your own due diligence. Ultimately, if there's something that makes you uncomfortable, just take a step back. Like I said, make sure you're self-custody and kind of wait to see how things play out. But yeah, self-custody. That's all I could really say.
Yeah, no, and I agree with you. And yeah, I mean, like I think there is, I guess a place for exchange custodians too, because I think, I mean, get my parents on board, for example. It's like that's it, just to get them to buy Bitcoin. It's either like, yeah, I guess Coinbase or one of these only Bitcoin only ones, right? And so I would rather send them to a Bitcoin only one like Strike or Swan or like a Fold, like where they get on their debit card or something like that. So I think that those are like good products to get people in. And from my understanding, I don't use any of those really products on the daily basis. But from my understanding, they all kind of encourage self custody in this sense. So I agree, but I do think it's kind of like interesting that I guess this is like I guess the main talking point now. It seems like it's all over Twitter, and it's not really I guess interest of mine to kind of dig into some of these things because I guess like you said, you never really know who's behind those Anon accounts, kind of like poking holes in some of these things, and I guess
and sometimes it's great. Like sometimes you're getting really good information, so I don't want to like minimize that. I just think you gotta be careful and kind of make up your own mind. Don't be prisoner of the moment. I've met and spoke with Will Reeves, CEO of Fold. Met and spoke with Corey. I know Corey. We talk. I think people like them both have like good intentions when it comes to Bitcoin. I think they want to get Bitcoin, foster Bitcoin adoption as much as anyone. You mentioned Strike. It seems I don't know Jack Mallers, but it seems like the same with him. So I think people gotta pump the brakes a little bit. Keep asking questions. Like you should always ask questions. But it's getting a little intense, and I don't need that negative energy right now, personally.
Yeah, sometimes you just gotta log off. Sometimes you just gotta do it.
But I mean, it's a cesspool. It's like monkeys flinging their shit at one another, And sometimes I've been involved in that, in the past. So I don't want to say that it's not. People just need to kind of relax. I think, like I said, the few of the Bitcoin companies and people I mentioned, I think they have good intentions, and I think they'll come out on the other side pretty good.
Yeah, and I mean, I think it's part of the Bitcoin ethos, right? The don't trust, verify, that kind of thing. But I mean, I think at the end of the day, I mean, we'll see how it all ends up playing out. But I'm sure like all these companies are gonna, that the ones with good intentions and we're not, going into the pub and note schemes, avoiding that kind of stuff. Like, right, they're not FTX or any of these other companies that are blown up. And so I think making the comparison or anything like that is not what I'm trying to do at all, but I'm just, some turmoil around it.
No, and but when people start comparing like a Swan to like FTX or BlockFi, to me, like at that point, they lose some credibility or they're just trolling. And I'm not saying anyone specific, but there's definitely a difference between the character of the people at these places and what they're trying to do. So it's really just be patient and self-custody.
Yeah, exactly. So, you've been in the Bitcoin space for a little bit now. So, I kind of want to talk about, I guess how this bear market is maybe a little bit different than other ones. I'll leave it kind of broad for you. So, I mean, I'll just leave it at that. Like, how would you describe this one differently compared to previous bear markets outside of maybe just the hubbub around the exchanges? So we just kind of went
What'd you say? What was the last thing you said?
outside of the hubbub around the exchanges that we kind of just went through.
I haven't been like a big participant in prior cycles. So I first like bought Bitcoin in 2013. Saw it like pump from like $130 to $1,200. But then I wasn't really around for that bear market. I mean, I got back in 2015, 2016, and it kind of, but I wasn't really like focused much. I would say like after 2017, I kind of experienced, that was my first real bear market of really kind of at least paying attention to what I own and being like, oh shit, like this shit's going to be worthless. Like, should I even still be here? But I still didn't understand Bitcoin. It wasn't until like end of 2019 that I really understood it. So my journey took a long time. I feel, when I say it takes that long, I'm like, oh, what, was he an idiot? But at the same time, back in like 2013, the resources weren't as readily available as they are now. There weren't like books and podcasts like there are now. There were a few if you were lucky enough to find them. But, it wasn't my time then. I would just say this bear market, it's tiring. During a bull market, everyone's happy. Everyone's seeing their wealth like appreciate. And then, it all kind of bursts. The shitcoiners kind of die out and stop yelling at you. So then it's just Bitcoiners left to kind of go at each other. And because of all the different exchanges and, from the Terra Luna, BlockFi, FTX, I'm sure there's more I'm missing. Now all the prime trust, fraud being uncovered. Now there's issues with Fortress, and then Ripple buys them. It's just like, it's exhausting. I'd say as long as for me, my conviction about Bitcoin hasn't changed. I feel like Bitcoin has to work. So I feel like I'm on a different, for me, Bitcoin has to work. And if it doesn't work, well, I knew I was along a journey that I was passionate about and was trying to do the right thing. So, in the end, no matter how negative the bear market is, I'm still able to like balance it out and kind of stay neutral most of the time. But it's exhausting for sure.
Yeah.
Sorry if that was long-winded.
No, that's fine. That's what these are for, right? Long-winded answers.
Yeah.
But I want to dive in a little bit more that you, when you said for you, Bitcoin has to work. What do you mean by that? And like, let's dive into that.
I just think a lot of the bad you see in society is rooted in a bad incentive structure, which is the fiat system. We're all like, chasing more money constantly to keep up on this hamster wheel as the monetary base keeps expanding and our time is stolen from us. So, who wants to keep living in a world where that perpetual system keeps happening? So yeah, maybe there's this big bust, everything collapses, and then what? We just start over with the same system again? I mean, yeah, but who wants that? Like, maybe some people want it. I rather, come up with something new if I think it could be better.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. So, I mean, I guess like from that perspective of like Bitcoin has to work, like, how do you see the transition going from like like fiat to like a Bitcoin standard? Do you think I feel like there's kind of two schools of thoughts. So I'll outline what I'd say, all right, what I've heard, and I'd like to hear, kind of if you think either theory's right or if you think maybe there's another one. But I think essentially there's either going to be a crash or burn, kind of like you described, right, where the fiat system just kind of implodes on itself, and then we have to basically go from the ground up, and that's where, everybody kind of starts the grassroots movement and kind of adopts Bitcoin. Or I think that there's going to be some sort of transitioning where it's basically like slow transition that's going to take quite some time, maybe 20, 30, 40, 50 years, maybe even longer. I don't know. and there's going to be fiat, then there's going to be some sort of like in between that doesn't really work and doesn't sustain very long, and then we kind of slowly transition to a Bitcoin standard. And I think the latter, that I kind of just described, is, I guess, the best situation for everyone. And obviously, the first situation is kind of like, I don't know, like World War Z or something like that. So, which one do you see either of those theories, like, I guess, ever playing out, or do you see kind of like another, I guess, aspect of things?
Let me look into my crystal ball, and I'm going to tell you how it's all going to play out. I don't know the speed at which it plays out, but and we kind of touched on this earlier. What I do think is you're going to have to look at other countries first, and see how they move, because look, like, all fiat currencies are kind of all relative to each other. Bitcoin is still like a pimple on an elephant's ass, like, relative to the rest of the whole entire world economy. But it's important, but it's not that important yet. So I'm not sure that the speed of it. I do see it like picking up velocity at a certain point, kind of breaking away. I just don't know when that's going to be. I don't know if that's like 30 years and then, or, some people are always like, the end is near, the end is near. I mean, gold bugs have been saying that since 1971, and now it's 50 years later, and gold's fucking useless, right? So what will things look like in 50 years? I have no idea. I have no idea. I mean, in 50 years, I'll be in my 80s. I don't know. I'll just be happy I could walk to the bathroom at that point, right? But
Yeah.
I don't know. I just know this is the right thing, so I'm gonna keep doing it.
Yeah, and I mean, I feel like everybody in the Bitcoin space is in it for I guess the longer you get in, you kind of stay thinking the gains, probably, like, a lot of people came into Bitcoin for the fiat gains. They kind of develop the thesis and in it for like the funding principles. So I like to say, like, you came for the money, but then you stayed for the money because you kinda, like, you ended up understanding it that way. So I think that there's kind of a development aspect of things, and then I think that there's a lot of ways that we can move forward with adoption, whether that's you putting it through the podcast, like social media and other things like that. But you brought up memes earlier, so I kind of want to get into that. Like, what do you think? Like, I guess the memeing aspect of things kind of plays into it. So we'll get a little bit, I guess, more of a jollier topic here. It's like, what do you think Bitcoin Twitter does outside of like you can come at each other? They do love their memes. So now, I guess, where do you think that I guess plays a role in everything, whether it's weren't feeling like putting awareness out there, like, I need, like, I guess, memes, even though it's kind of unconventional, has kind of played a role when it becomes a Bitcoin adoption.
It's funny. I was on a panel last year at the Pacific Bitcoin conference. Are you going to that this year?
Yeah, I'll be there. It'll be my first time, so I'm excited.
Awesome.
Hey, actually, so I'm really excited to do that.
So what's the last thing you said?
I said I've never been to LA, so I'm kind of excited to get there and then get out. So.
Nice. Well, I'll definitely see you there. So last year when I was at the Pacific Bitcoin conference, I was on a panel with American Hodl and Lynn Alden, and our discussion was about memes, and kind of like, it was your exact question. So I have a better answer for you now that I was on that panel with them. American Hodl brought up a good thing. I think he was asked, what are like the most important memes in Bitcoin? I think we were all asked that, and I kind of like fell flat on my face with the answer, but his was great, so I'm just going to kind of regurgitate it. And I think it's HODL, which, and stay humble, stack sats. So HODL, comes from the, I think, Bitcoin talk forums or Reddit. I can't remember. Stay humble, stack sats comes from Matt Odell. And they're two very important principles that are very hard to actually live by, right? The HODL hodling is very simple, but it's not easy, right? Getting a position, not being affected by the volatility of the USD price of Bitcoin, and just kind of knowing like, hey, I'm in this for the long term. And then to stay humble, stack sats. Just, Bitcoin humbles everybody. In the bull market, things feel fucking awesome. And then you're kind of punched in the face repeatedly. So I think those have really permeated not only the Bitcoin culture, but obviously the crypto culture, because they steal everything from us because we come up with all the good memes. And even in traditional finance, you hear things like HODL and FOMO and to the moon and all these crazy things. So it's definitely, it's permeated throughout popular culture. I think it's important. I think memes help otherwise kind of potentially boring but important topics spread. You can make things fun and entertaining that normally wouldn't get the airtime. Because like instead of HODL, if it was just like be a long-term investor and have conviction, that's not fun, right? Or, like stay humble, stack sats. There's so much like alliteration there. It's just like it all clicks. So yeah, it may seem like stupid on its face, but humans, we're pretty basic in the end. So these things are important. Human psychology, memes are important. That's what I would say. Again, I don't even know if I answered your question.
No, I think you did. And I think, those things like the mantras and whatever, they kind of like stick with people, right? And I mean, I think, eventually some people initially take it on like face value, kind of like you're saying, but then, the more they hear it, the more they kind of like dig into it, or the more they kind of like refer to it. And in a sense, it's kind of something that, like you said, has kind of permeated into the investing culture, which I think, it just shows the importance of it too. And I think, not only that, I think, the picture aspects of things too, right? Because I mean, they say pictures worth 1,000 words. So like those kind of, meme aspects of things have always, in a sense, like, I guess, brought some sort of emotion into people, whether it's something that pisses somebody off or something that, they relate to, get laughed to. Like it always seems like some sort of meme is pulling something out of somebody. So, and I think that those are getting more and more, I guess like Bitcoiners are working on those more and more as time goes on. So, I just, we're not going to sit here and do any like verbal memeage or anything like that. But, when it comes to like, I guess the picture aspect of things, like, being on the internet, like seeing those develop, do you think that those, like, in a sense, like, can be are helpful, or do you think like, some of them could be potentially harmful depending on like how, like, I guess how graphic, like how, I guess intense, how out there they are?
The answer would be yes. So all of that. Yeah, I mean, look at like, and it's not just, traditional finance and pop culture that memes permeate. It's even governments. I remember when there was like a Winnie the Pooh meme making fun of the Chinese leader, and like they banned Winnie the Pooh in China. Or I forget what the name of the movie was, but Sony came out with a movie that made fun of Kim Jong-un in North Korea, and they threatened to like attack the U.S. Like I don't even remember exactly, but things like this matter. Satire, comedy help, penetrate propaganda. So yeah, they matter. They're important. It can be dangerous. But on the flip side, like, free speech is free speech. And as long as you aren't endangering anyone, I think anything's fair game. And if you can't, handle the heat, stay out of the kitchen, right? I mean, it could get it could get intense and like it could get malicious, and I don't like condone that. I'm not about that. But I also think like sunlight is the best disinfectant. So if if something bothers you, if it bothers you, it probably bothers other people. Let them see it, let them be bothered like you are. Don't try to hide it. Hiding things to me just makes things worse.
Yeah, that's a fair point, and I agree with that in a sense as well. But there has been, I guess, more movement outside of memes. You brought up Pacific Bitcoin, right? There's been a massive amount of growth when it comes to like Bitcoin conferences, Bitcoin meetups, all these other things. So we've been kind of talking about like internet a little bit, but I want to kind of talk about the importance of like meeting in person before I let you go to. So, how do you, I guess, see the development of like all these big conferences all over the globe? Like even some conferences are not even specific, but there's a lot of Bitcoiners that are beginning to attend them. Whether it's like the freedom forums and those kind of things as well. So, now, I guess, how do you think the development of conferences and kind of like the meetup scene and like the in-person aspect of things has developed over time? And like, you think like it's maybe I guess a good thing, or do you think like, there could be a scene where there's almost like too many Bitcoin conferences and it's getting kind of watered down?
I don't. I don't think you could have too much of a good thing, especially in this scenario. Even if there's too many conferences, most people can only like go to one, right? And they're going to go to the one that's probably closest to them, or the one time a year they want to go on vacation somewhere. Maybe they'll do an extended trip. So I love that there's all these different conferences. For someone like me, it gets tiring because I go to a lot of them. So yeah, then it's kind of too much of a good thing. But outside of like the crazy people like me that show up at like 4+ conferences a year, traveling all around, I think it's great. And the conferences, they could get really expensive. Hotels, flights, it could run like a couple $1,000s. And for someone just getting into Bitcoin, I would say probably not a good idea. Like, more important to start accumulating Bitcoin than go to a conference, unless like you're really trying to break in and want to work in the Bitcoin space. And there's nothing like meeting people in real life, especially during bear markets. For someone like me, because like we've talked about, it gets pretty negative. It's nice to be in person, because it's just like a great feeling to be around other like-minded people, all on a similar mission in terms of like an end goal of seeing Bitcoin succeed. That means a lot of things to a lot of people. But definitely, if you can't go to a conference, go to a Bitcoin meetup. They're free, right? Like, all around the world, there's Bitcoin meetups. So yeah, if you can't afford to go to a conference, go to a meetup. There's like no excuse not to, and to meet like Bitcoiners in real life, unless you're like really concerned about your security for some reason. If we want Bitcoin to be adopted ultimately, like, everyone's gonna be a Bitcoiner. So you have to weigh those risks. I think 99% of people are fine. It's more of the well-known people in the Bitcoin space that might have to be a little more careful in certain circumstances.
Yeah, I gotcha, and that makes sense. All right, so we're here in like September. We're we got like 3-ish more months left in the year. So what do you see? I guess like Bitcoin, I guess near future, whether it's the rest of this year, next year, like what do you see in the development of the space? Like, what kind of excites you? Is there any like project maybe you want to shout out or something like that? Like, what do you kind of have your eyes on? And I kind of, even though there is like, some negativity, the market can be exhausting. Like, what are some things that really excites you and get you ready and keep you going for the next couple of months or so?
It was just being at BitBlock Boom a couple of weeks ago, right? And meeting you and meeting optimistic people working on, certain projects. Like, I got to see Rob Hamilton, who's working on Anchor Watch, which is like insurance for Bitcoin. And he's working on something else called Miniscript. This is all like way above my technical understanding, but, just improving the ways you could use Bitcoin. It's happening behind the scenes. The marketing of Bitcoin and getting the word out is equally as important as people building, coming up with I don't know if I have anything specific. What else is going on out there? I know some things that aren't like public, not like news breaking, and they'll I'm just bullish on Bitcoiners.
There we go.
I don't know. I didn't give you anything good there.
It's all good, man. I love it though. I mean, why can't you, or how could you not be bullish on Bitcoin, especially when right, you're just in Austin and mecca of Bitcoin, and there's so much going on there. Right, with Lab.
And while we were there, did it like how often did people talk about the Bitcoin price?
Hey, I never really heard about it one time, so
I can't remember once that anyone mentioned the Bitcoin price, which just kind of tells you something like, yeah, like everyone wants number to go up, but there's more meaning to it. It's like there's just this shared sense of mission that's going on. And as long as we have that continue, I think we're going to be just fine.
100%. All right, Neil, you've been very generous with your time, so I really appreciate you coming on. Why don't you tell people like where they can find you, where they can find the merch, like where should you go maybe buy the shirt that you're wearing.
Oh, so, okay. So this says enjoy Bitcoin. You could get that at FOMO21.com. I should have like a promo code for your listeners right now. But if you just like sign up on the website, you get like a 10% off. FOMO21.com. You can find me at Neil Jacobs on Twitter. NEILJ. You can see it right on the screen here if you're watching. NEILJCOBS if you're listening. I do have some news, but I can't share it yet. Some personal news of something else I'll be doing in the Bitcoin space, but it's like just a couple weeks too early to share it.
Yeah.
So follow me on Twitter.
Break it for me.
So follow me on Twitter, and you'll find out.
All right, cool. That's a little teaser. So follow Neil on Twitter and then check out FOMO21 Shop. All that stuff will be in the I also include tweets too. So the ones that I don't have down there. So
yeah, on Twitter it's at FOMO21 Shop, but if you just type in the URL, it's FOMO21.com. So
awesome stuff. Thanks, Neil.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for tuning in to this entire episode with Neil Jacobs. If you enjoyed this episode, you're going to love the episode I had with Dennis Porter, all about Bitcoin adoption and nation state adoption. You can click on the link right here to watch that one immediately following this one. And if you found some value in this one, please hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. All right, I'll see you at the next one.